Let me thank ET Edge for this platform, the dignitaries who accompanied me in lighting the lamp. Let me also acknowledge the presence of my own colleagues from Niti Aayog, who are in the audience and helped me to prepare my remarks this morning, Rajiv Sen and Shakshi, and my own support team from Niti Aayog. I was saying on my way here that an important reason for accepting this invitation is it's not often that I get an opportunity to discuss sustainable development goal issues with the private sector. And I hope in my remarks I'll indicate quite why at this important moment engagement of the private sector in the SDGs is important and relevant. Let me start a little bit in talking about Niti Aayog and its relationship with the Sustainable Development Goals. I myself was privileged to be asked by the Honorable Prime Minister in May of 2022 to become the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog. As many of you might know, Niti Aayog is his creation, and since we've had the same Prime Minister since it was created in effectively the 2015, it's been going 10 years now, it is an institution that obviously has been shaped by his vision and his leadership. Now, broadly speaking, Niti Aayog is meant to be the government's brains trust think tank. We are meant to look ahead, and to do the thinking that line ministries are not able to do on their own because they're concerned with day-to-day business. But then it's very much the idea that the accountability for implementation goes to the line ministries and the ministers who are elected representatives. There's one exception to that, though, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. Niti Aayog is what we call the nodal agency for the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have a Sustainable Development Goals unit who is, as I said, has helped me prepare for this event. Let me, before I return to Niti Aayog, say a little bit about how I have come in my 3 years here to think about the Sustainable Development Goals and what it means for the trajectory ahead towards Viksit Bharat, which of course is the grand project that Honorable Prime Minister has put before the whole nation as a challenge over the next now 22 years. You would probably know that in 2015, a year after the Prime Minister was selected by his party to be Prime Minister, two important conferences took place, or two gatherings, which was the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and also the so-called Paris COP, the Paris SDG goals. And I think the point that people sometimes forget is that the SDGs are really a commitment by all leaders who swore to the commitment, and we still have the same leader, to the populations of their own nations. That in the 21st century, this is the minimum, if you like, this is the definition of decent living, and this is what we commit to provide to you as citizens of our country. The important point I want to make is that this is dominantly a domestic commitment. It then has its transnational dimensions, which India stressed in its G20 presidency, because financing has to come from abroad. But the real point is to deliver domestically. And here, I think the 2 points I want to make is that India has been extraordinarily successful in localizing the concept of SDGs as part of its program of cooperative and competitive federalism, which is the main mechanism by which the Prime Minister wishes to carry states along. Niti Aayog, on behalf of the Prime Minister, convened something that we call the Governing Council, and I can tell you it is an awe-inspiring experience to be sitting by the Prime Minister and to see the chief ministers of all states as development practitioners, not just as politicians. I think there's an additional point that I would like to make about the SDGs. We recently presented at the United Nations a document summarizing India's achievements of the SDGs called the Voluntary National Review. This is a public document. It's a very detailed document. And I think for those of you, particularly in the ESG space, who want documentation of what India has achieved through its SDGs, I would certainly commend to you India's Voluntary National Review, which is on the Niti Aayog website. It is also on the UN's website. So now I come to this gathering and the importance to me of engaging with the private sector in this forum. So many of you would know that Niti in Hindi is policy or policies. In English, we capitalize it as the National Institution for Transforming India. But here I want to focus on Niti Aayog as a Hindi phrase, and Niti Aayog is Policy Commission in comparison with what it replaced and in whose building we still occupy, the Planning Commission. And I want to make the point to you that the transition from a planning commission to a policy commission is only part achieved, and it is in realizing the promise of a policy commission that our engagement with the private sector will really flower. Why do I say that? Let me say that there was a belief which I encountered when I was the Director General of the National Council of Applied Economic Research, that in India, policy did not work because issues of implementation were insuperable. I would submit that in the last 10 years of the Modi government and of Niti Aayog, we have made giant strides in the machinery of implementation, and if you like, the evidence of that is all around us in what is happening with highways, what's happening in terms of UPI. So I think that the old skepticism that policy does not work and you have to have government schemes which is what the Planning Commission was largely about, is now a concept we need to discard. And so, having lived for a quarter century in the United States, worked at the World Bank, let me tell you what I think is implied by a policy commission. Policy is to persuade or coax or direct the private sector to do the kinds of, to act in a certain direction that public policy requires by setting up intelligent legislation and intelligent regulation. And I would say that those of you who follow budgets closely would see that giant strides are being made by the government. We had a reform of the direct tax code. We've had just now a reform of the goods and services tax, the unification of the appellate tribunal for indirect taxes. And so I would say the agenda going forward is really, and I don't expect, although there may be time for a couple of questions, I don't expect to expand on that here. But in the course of the discussions over the course of the day, I would like the discussion to be not only about schemes, ESG, but what does it really take for government to enlist the private sector. A very obvious example, well, a successful example is what we've achieved with UPI. An important example going forward is encouraging green energy, the decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors, and it would, all of these will be much more powerful if they are done through policy, including pricing policy, than done through, as it were, government subsidies and government schemes. So I think we started enough on time that I probably should end here. And could somebody tell me whether I am supposed to recognize, is there meant to be time for questions and answers? I don't see a compare here. Or should I just step down? Could somebody guide me, please? Sorry? Continue? Okay, because it says time's up particularly. But, what the hell? So if anybody wants to raise a question or two, let me use my remaining time and I'll recognize people myself. Anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question? Right, okay. There's somebody in the back there, yes?
It's not often that we get to ask questions on a platform like this, now that we have Sir's very kind presence here, and he's
There's
opened
somebody
the
at the
house.
back there.
Can we have a microphone for Sir, please?
Right. Are there mics or not?
Ma'am, can you please take the mic? So I'd like to request you to please stand up so that my team can identify you.
Okay.
I'd like to request you to please introduce yourself. Ma'am, can you present him with the mic, please? Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir. My name, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Good morning, sir. My name is Arup Tripathi, and I'm the founder of Strategium Advisors, management consulting firm. Now, having worked with policymakers and the corporate alike, sir, my question to you is, how do we motivate innovation towards product development? We're talking about sustainability, but unfortunately, largely our efforts in India, the policy is seen as a compliance requirement, and the corporate largely reports on ESG matrices. Beyond that, there is very little effort on innovating, on developing products. How do we take that aspect forward, sir?
Well, 2 points. One is these are the habits that we need to shed. I don't, look, I mean, societies like the United States, Finland at another extreme, etc., have well lubricated systems for funding innovation, often defense related. And you would know that in the last 2 or 3 budgets, a range of schemes have been developed, which are now in the stages of implementation for challenge grants for innovation. But I think where we want to head is a US-type ecosystem where we have a differentiated enough financial sector, and there, I mean, people on the podium with me are from the financial sector. So I think that where we need to be heading to is where there's enough capacity in the private sector, both risk-bearing capacity and assessment capacity, to be able to sort out viable proposals. What I hear, and it is remarkable how startups have flourished under this government, but what I understand is that the issue is less at the startup stage, but there is a lack of, I don't know whether the right term is mezzanine financing, which is the scale-up financing. Why that gap exists and what it would take to fill that gap, I don't know. Would my colleagues from the banking sector wish to respond? Is that diagnosis? Jain Saab, would you like to respond? I think he wants to respond. Okay, fine. Right. I think the organizers are getting a little anxious now because I've strayed from my script. So let me wish you all well and take my leave of you. There's one question there. If there's
Just one question, sir.
Our audience now has a couple of questions. We'll take a couple more if that's all right with you.
Yeah, I just need somebody to manage me.
Sure.
So go ahead.
We'll take the question from Sir. I'll be right here next to you. Yes, please.
So I have some experience of reading what the Niti Aayog does. It's absolutely wonderful. No questions about that.
Where are you from, please?
Well, sir, I studied at the same university as yours, University of Oxford, Sustainable Urban Development. I'm Z-Axis. I run an infrastructure consultancy firm for housing boards and urban local bodies and things like that.
Okay.
So at the policy level, it's one of the best documents in the world, even when it comes to SDGs. But the problem is, especially regarding infrastructure contracts, the habits of hiring implementing agencies and vendor agencies, this hasn't changed much, sir. You still need somebody with 30 years of experience in something that needs to be implemented right now with a completely new and innovative approach. So that
Could
needs to change,
I
sir.
respond just? Could I just respond quickly? So, a framing I'd like to offer you is that our problems are the problems of success and of growth. Okay, institutions are not evolving at the rate that the economy is, and that's a challenge. How is the government responding to that challenge? There were announcements which are now being implemented. Niti Aayog is involved. There's a high-level committee on non-financial regulation. There is a committee, of course, on financial regulation. There's a committee headed by the Cabinet Secretary on state-level regulation. We are 1/6 of humanity, and, it's not straightforward. But I would say that if you look at where we've come in the last 10 years, it may not be as fast and as far as we wish to go, but I think it's in the right direction. So I would just say that there are bodies who can, or individuals who can provide, as it were, or shape the agenda of these various entities. I'll leave it at that. Maybe the last question?
Yes, please. I have a microphone with the gentleman right here.
There's one at the back.
We'll try and come to you. Yes, please.
It's not working.
It's working, sir.
Good morning, sir. This is Sishi Ranjan, and I work with farmers and farmers community. And farming community has a lot to contribute towards the carbon sequestration. And when I say this with a lot of confidence, and I have been working after passing out from Banaras University for the last 30 years with the farmers and farming community.
Please hold the mic closer.
But, sir, one major problem I am facing these days, and I am sure that somewhere in policy that should be addressed, that more than sequestration, people are talking of decreasing carbons. If I say most of the farming practices, say for example, Eastern India and Northern India, paddy is cultivated under submerged, not by choice, but it is a risk mitigation strategy by the farmers because of erratic rainfalls. But globally and in India also, we talk of methane emissions and other emissions, whereas there are immense scope of sequestering carbon from carbon residues, whether it is paddy straw or whether it is any other crop residues. So, I mean,
Okay.
can we...
This seems to be a statement rather than a question, and I fully agree with it. Maybe we could take the last question.
Okay, thank you, sir.
The last question goes to the gentleman here. My apologies, sir, but he raised his hand first. We'll try and come to you for offline questions for sure. Appreciate it. Yes, please.
Hello. Yeah, I'm audible. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the such an enlightening session. I'm Munish Sharma. I'm representing BSES Rajdhani Power Limited. We are a joint venture in Delhi for power distribution and one of the most successful public-private partnership. Sir, a direct question that as a private setup, we have brought all the improvements which are sought for in the sector. And we appreciate the transition of the body from Planning Commission to the Niti Aayog. We locally are governed in various states through state regulators. And when it comes to policy interventions of the government and ultimately adherence of the companies like ours, there's a lot of lag in that. How do we bridge that lag, sir? Because I know the aspirations of India. We have been hearing our Honorable Prime Minister, and you have also pitched a lot on that. We have been working on decarbonization. We have been working on net zero objectives. We have been working on sustainable development goal. When it comes to the local approvals from a regulator, I see overhang there. So any intervention from the Niti which facilitates all these things, because ultimately it has to work on a state level. Thank you, sir.
Well, look, I've returned from the World Bank to India in 2001. And, we're going through so many transitions. Just let us reflect on the magnitude of those. When I got here, essentially, all of generation, at least, well, generation and distribution, was in the public sector. It was inefficient, but it was in the public sector, and all the inefficiencies were masked. So in the 2000s, I think we made good progress in bringing merchant power generators into a framework which was still largely PSU dominated, and trying to empower regulators along the way. And of course, what happened in Delhi was a successful case of privatization. Odisha, privatized and has reprivatized, and apparently it's going fairly well. I would say that generation and even more transmission, I mean, there's no perfect model, but I would just share with you, and then I'll close, an insight that I received at a conference in the US and at Stanford University many, many years ago when I was, or maybe it was when I was at NCAR. There's somebody called Paul Wallach, who, is one of the noted academics on regulation. He said that, if you like, regulators were set up by Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s, and every inch of the way, in terms of their jurisdiction, power, precedent, has been litigated, okay? So I'm just saying that from where we were in 2000 to where we are in 2025, both in terms of the ownership pattern of distribution companies, because frankly, the whole renewable space is largely a private sector space. It's only now that the NTPCs of the world are coming into it. So I think the real question is two questions. Are we going fast enough? And the answer to that is almost certainly not. Are we going in the right direction? My submission to you is, I believe we are. And with that, let me thank the organizers.